It looked like Adam Silver has found himself in some serious hot water over the management of the WNBA, and is they faking ratings?
Caitlin Clark just ended Adam Silver's career with 3 simple words that sent the entire basketball world into complete chaos. The NBA commissioner thought he could downplay the woman who single-handedly saved his failing women's league, but Clark fired back with a response so savage that even his own players started picking sides. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Silver spent weeks trying to convince everyone that the WNBA's success wasn't just about one player. He gave interview after interview talking about historic growth and rocket trajectories while completely ignoring the elephant in the room. Clark wasn't just carrying the league on her back, she was basically doing CPR on a dying organization. The 3 words that broke everything? Simply devastating. Clark responded to Silver's comments about relationship issues in the WNBA by posting on social media exactly what everyone was thinking.
Stepped out and started talking about the crazy nonsense of a civil war that's going on between Iron Man or Iron Woman Kathy Engelberg and Captain America Nafisa Collier, man.
Her response was so perfectly timed and brutally honest that it instantly went viral across every platform imaginable. Now get this twisted part. Silver had just finished his damage control tour, desperately trying to smooth things over with players who were openly calling for leadership changes. He thought he had everything under control until Clark decided to remind everyone who really runs the show. Her post didn't just get likes and shares, it started a full-blown revolution. The internet absolutely exploded within minutes. Fans who had been quietly frustrated with the WNBA's leadership finally had their champion speaking up. Comments flooded in from everywhere, with people praising Clark for having the guts to say what needed to be said. Even neutral basketball fans were jumping into the conversation, calling her response legendary. But wait, it gets even more brutal. Clark's timing was absolutely perfect because Silver had just wrapped up another interview where he tried to take credit for the league's growth. He was sitting there talking about his vision and leadership, while the woman who actually made it all possible was watching from the sidelines. Her 3-word response was basically a reality check that nobody could ignore. The backlash against Silver was immediate and merciless. Social media users started sharing side-by-side comparisons of WNBA ratings before and after Clark entered the league. The numbers told a story that Silver's fancy corporate speak couldn't hide. Without Clark, the WNBA was basically background noise. With her, it became appointment television. Not only that, but other players started jumping into the conversation too. Veterans who had been quietly dealing with league dysfunction for years suddenly felt brave enough to speak up. Clark's response gave them permission to voice their own frustrations with how things were being handled behind the scenes. The 3 words that started this entire mess proved something that everyone already knew, but nobody wanted to admit. Clark isn't just another player in the WNBA, she's the entire reason anyone cares about women's basketball right now, and Silver just learned that lesson the hard way.
Commissioner Adam Silver says Caitlin Clark has set the world on fire. Silver didn't reveal much about their brief conversation, but his admiration for Clark's achievements couldn't have been clearer. Speaking on FanDuel Sports Network, he said Caitlin Clark set the world on fire, not just this community. And it's easy to see why, from dominating college basketball at Iowa, where her famous number 22 jersey was retired, to becoming the first overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft.
Let's rewind to where this nuclear disaster actually started. Adam Silver walked into that NBC News interview thinking he was about to deliver another polished corporate performance. Instead, he accidentally confessed that his precious WNBA was basically a dysfunctional family reunion where nobody talks to each other. The interview was supposed to be a simple chat about leadership and growth. Silver probably rehearsed his talking points about historic expansion and positive momentum, but then he decided to go completely off script and admit something that sent shockwaves through the entire basketball community.
Own up and step down. I believe that's what should happen. Kathy need to just walk away. We're going off into the sunset. Well, the half bright sunset, I should say, because it ain't gonna be a good goodbye. But I feel like at this point she gonna have to step down. Stephen A. Smith said it last week, and I'm saying it right now.
Silver looked straight into the camera and said the WNBA had serious relationship issues between players and leadership, not communication challenges or growing pains, but straight up relationship problems. That's corporate speak for everyone hates each other and nothing is working properly. Here's what makes this confession absolutely hilarious. hilarious. Silver spent the first half of the interview bragging about rocket ship trajectories and unprecedented success. He was practically patting himself on the back for overseeing this amazing transformation. Then he immediately contradicted everything by admitting the whole operation was falling apart internally. Fans watching this interview were probably doing double takes. 1 minute, Silver is celebrating historic growth. The next minute, he's basically saying his employees want to quit. The cognitive dissonance was so obvious that social media started roasting him before the interview even finished airing. Not only that, but Silver made things infinitely worse by trying to protect Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. He gave her credit for overseeing growth while simultaneously admitting she couldn't maintain basic relationships with her own players. Talk about throwing someone under the bus while pretending to defend them. The timing of this interview was catastrophically bad for Silver. Clark had just signed another massive speaking deal worth hundreds of thousands per event. She was literally printing money outside the WNBA, while Silver was on television explaining why his league was broken. The contrast couldn't have been more embarrassing. But wait, there's more stupidity coming. Silver actually tried to sound optimistic about fixing these relationship issues. He smiled and talked about confidence in resolving problems while his own players were on social media threatening lockouts. The man was living in a completely different reality than everyone else. Basketball fans immediately started connecting the dots. If the commissioner of both leagues was admitting the WNBA had relationship problems, then things were way worse than anyone imagined. This wasn't just typical workplace drama. This was fundamental dysfunction at the highest levels. Let's be brutally honest here. Silver's confession basically confirmed every conspiracy theory about WNBA management that fans had been whispering about all season. Players calling out refs weekly, executives avoiding interviews, and now the big boss admitting nobody gets along. The league was officially exposed as a complete mess. The interview ended with Silver trying to sound confident about the future, but the damage was already done. He had just admitted on national television that his league was dysfunctional, while the woman keeping it relevant was cashing checks elsewhere. But here's where the story gets absolutely ridiculous. The same week Silver was confessing about relationship problems, the WNBA dropped a bombshell announcement about their finals ratings magically doubling. Except there was one tiny problem that made this celebration completely fake. Nielsen suddenly changed how they count viewers this year, and the timing was suspiciously convenient. They started including bars, airports, hotel lobbies, and basically any random television that happened to be playing in public spaces. So yeah, the ratings looked better, but only because they completely rigged the math. Now, get this absurd part. The league was celebrating these inflated numbers while pretending Caitlin Clark had nothing to do with their success. They wanted everyone to believe that suddenly millions of new fans discovered women's basketball through pure coincidence. The level of delusion was absolutely staggering. Fans immediately saw through this pathetic attempt at manipulation. Social media exploded with people pointing out that you can't just change the rules and then brag about improvement. It's basically saying you're taller this year because you started wearing platform shoes. The fake victory lap was embarrassing to watch. Let's talk about what really happened with those ratings. Every single game that Clark played in drew massive audiences. When she got injured and missed time, viewership dropped instantly. When she came back, the numbers shot right back up. The correlation was so obvious that even casual fans could see the pattern. The WNBA tried desperately to downplay Clark's impact by spreading credit around to other players and storylines. They wanted to create this narrative about overall league growth and rising talent levels, but the actual data told a completely different story that demolished their corporate fantasy. Independent analysts started breaking down the real numbers without Nielsen's convenient adjustments. The results were devastating for the WNBA's credibility. Clark's games were pulling numbers that dwarfed everything else in women's basketball. She wasn't just a star, she was the entire reason people were tuning in. Not only that, but ticket prices told the same story. Games featuring Clark were selling out instantly, while other matchups were practically giving away seats. Merchandise sales followed the exact same pattern. Everything pointed to one undeniable conclusion that the league refused to acknowledge. The fake ratings celebration became even more embarrassing when compared to Clark's individual impact. Her college games at Iowa had drawn bigger audiences than most WNBA finals games in previous years. She brought an entire fan base with her that had never cared about professional women's basketball before. Here's the most pathetic part. WNBA executives were doing victory laps about doubled ratings while their biggest star was making more money giving speeches than playing basketball. Clark's speaking fees were reportedly close to $500,000 per event. She could skip an entire season and still out-earn most players. The ratings manipulation was just another example of league leadership living in denial about their actual situation. They cooked the books, celebrated fake success, and ignored the one person actually driving their growth. The whole thing was a masterclass in incompetent management. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a full-blown player revolt was brewing against Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. Players weren't just frustrated with leadership anymore, they were openly calling for her head on social media and demanding actual change. The rebellion started with Nneka Ogwumike going on national television and absolutely destroying the league's management. She didn't hold back or use diplomatic language. She straight up called out leadership for being disconnected from player concerns and failing to address basic workplace issues that had been festering for years. But that was just the beginning of this uprising. Sophie Cunningham dropped hints about a potential player lockout during interviews, basically threatening to shut down the entire league if things didn't improve. Veterans who had been quietly suffering through dysfunction for years were finally speaking up publicly. The most devastating revelation came from Candace Parker during her podcast. She casually mentioned that Adam Silver texts her more than her own commissioner does. Think about how absolutely insane that sounds. The NBA commissioner has better communication with WNBA players than the actual WNBA commissioner. Let's break down how pathetic this situation really is. Parker revealed that Silver personally congratulated her when she had a baby, when she retired, and when she signed her Amazon broadcasting deal. Engelbert's response to all these major life events: complete radio silence. Zero acknowledgement of one of the league's biggest stars. Sabrina Ionescu piled on by admitting she also has a better relationship with Silver than with Engelbert. This wasn't just one isolated complaint anymore. This was a pattern of complete leadership failure. The commissioner of the league had somehow become less relevant to players than someone who doesn't even work there. Not only that, but players were sharing stories about basic respect issues that made Engelbert look completely incompetent. Simple things that any decent manager would handle automatically were being ignored or mishandled by league leadership. The player complaints weren't just about communication either. They were calling out travel conditions, pay disparities, officiating problems, and a dozen other issues that had been swept under the rug for years. Engelbert's response to this mounting criticism was basically to pretend everything was fine. Here's where it gets even more embarrassing for league leadership. While players were publicly revolting against their own commissioner, they were praising the NBA commissioner who actually bothered to treat them with basic human decency. The contrast was so stark that it made Engelbert look like a complete amateur. Stephen A. Smith jumped into this mess by calling for Engelbert to resign on national television. He wasn't subtle about it either, saying she needed to step down and walk away into the sunset. When major media personalities are calling for your resignation, that's usually a sign that your career is over. The writing was clearly on the wall. Players had lost confidence in leadership, fans were demanding change, and media personalities were openly calling for resignations. Engelbert was becoming a liability that the league couldn't afford to keep defending. The player revolt wasn't just about one commissioner though, it was about a fundamental breakdown in how the WNBA operates from top to bottom. But here's the ultimate plot twist that makes this entire situation absolutely terrifying for the WNBA. Caitlin Clark doesn't actually need them anymore. While Silver was begging for forgiveness and Engelbert was losing control of her own players, Clark was building a financial empire that made her completely untouchable. Clark's endorsement portfolio reads like a who's who of major corporations. Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, and literally half a dozen other massive brands are throwing money at her faster than she can sign contracts. Her speaking engagements alone are paying more than most WNBA players make in an entire season. Let's talk about the numbers that are keeping league executives awake at night. Clark's speaking fees are reportedly close to $500,000 per event. She could do 2 speeches and out-earn the WNBA salary cap. The woman has achieved complete financial independence from basketball while still being the biggest name in the sport. The power dynamic has completely flipped in ways that probably scare the hell out of league leadership. Usually players need the league for financial security and career advancement, but Clark has reversed that equation entirely. Now the league needs her way more than she needs them. Not only that, but Clark's brand value extends far beyond basketball. She's become a cultural phenomenon that transcends sports entirely. Families who never watched basketball are buying her jerseys. Young girls are copying her shooting form in driveways across America. She's created a movement that the WNBA just happens to benefit from. The league's dependence on one player has reached dangerous levels that expose fundamental weaknesses in their business model. When Clark got injured and missed games, attendance dropped immediately. Ticket prices fell, merchandise sales plummeted, television ratings crashed. The entire operation basically went into life support mode. Here's what makes this dependency absolutely ridiculous. The WNBA has been around for decades but needed one college player to make them relevant. All those years of trying to build sustainable fan bases and develop stars, and then Clark shows up and accomplishes more in one season than the previous 20 years combined. Clark's financial independence gives her leverage that no WNBA player has ever possessed. She could take a year off to focus on endorsements and speaking tours while still making millions. She could retire tomorrow and transition into broadcasting or business ventures. The league literally cannot force her to do anything. Meanwhile, league executives are probably having panic attacks about what happens if Clark decides she's tired of dealing with their dysfunction. Without her, the WNBA goes back to being a niche product that most sports fans ignore completely. The three-word response that started this whole mess was basically Clark reminding everyone who actually has the power in this relationship. Silver can apologize all he wants, but Clark holds all the cards now. She's not just a player anymore, she's the entire reason the WNBA matters. If you're enjoying this content and want to see more breakdowns of sports drama, smash that subscribe button and let's keep exposing the truth together.